Good afternoon or good morning. All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're listening from. My name is Filipe Cassapo. I'm calling you right now, connecting you from a city called Curitiba in the south of Brazil, more or less 400 kilometers at the south of São Paulo, more or less 1,000 kilometers at the south of Rio de Janeiro. It is really a great pleasure and an honor for me to join the Campus Party UK. So I would like first to thank you for having me and thanking you for your time and for letting me have this opportunity of sharing some ideas with you guys. So as you may have noticed from my accent, I'm actually French, but I've been living for 20 years in Brazil right now. So I would just describe myself as a world citizen. And my purpose in the next 30 minutes is to share with you some ideas on what maybe we could call the imperatives of the 21st century, and maybe also on the importance of using our innovation ecosystem and developing a healthy, sustainable leadership inside of our innovation ecosystem so that we can really design the future that we desire. So this is what I want to share with you guys. I would like to share some ideas and some examples and maybe debate a little bit with you guys what is an innovation ecosystem and why these innovation ecosystem are so important for designing the future that we really desire. And as we know, we are living quite troubled times, right, everywhere in the world. So maybe it is a good time for us to think a little bit and to follow the right priorities on what really matters for us. So in order to do so, I've prepared 4 topics. First, I would like to maybe share some of what I imagine being the imperatives of progress. When we speak about innovation, we have to speak about progress. This is what really matters. But I would like to show some ideas on what is a systemic progress. That is, a sustainable system thinking progress where innovation makes really a lot of sense. Then I want to show some examples of innovation ecosystems that we have here in Brazil, in the city of Curitiba. And I want to show you how we can address crisis, how we can address sustainable challenges such as Corona, for example, using our innovation ecosystems. And then the main point I want to share is this importance of, crossing the threshold and maybe try to develop leadership for sustainable development, leveraging our innovation ecosystems. And my purpose, right, for this 30-minute talk, and my purpose maybe on interacting with you guys at the campus party, is that we could be able together to build the future that we really desire. We don't need a future that was designed for us. We can design our own future. We don't need to obey orders of what come from above us, but we really can make emerge the future that we desire. So in order to start, I would like to show some ideas on what we could call systemic progress, right? So the idea that innovation is progress. Innovation is creating value for improving the quality of life of people everywhere in the world. And what really matters when we want to do that is to understand the world as a web, a connected web. That's the reason why we call that systemic progress. And I would like to start with this image that we are now, all of us used to see quite frequently right now, which is the image of using a mask, right? All of us everywhere in the world have to wear a mask, and it's important because when we wear a mask, I know that at the beginning we think, okay, I'm gonna wear a mask because maybe I'm obliged to use a mask, or maybe because I want to protect myself, right? I want to protect myself against the other, so I have to wear a mask because the other are the problem. I am not the problem, the others are the problem, and I need to protect myself from the other. But when you think deeper about what is the meaning of wearing a mask, is actually you recognizing that you are yourself the problem. If myself, I wear a mask, I do that not in order to protect myself from the other, but to protect the other from me, which is quite different, right? I recognize that I can be a link of transmission of Corona, and therefore if I want to protect myself, I need firstly to think about protecting everybody. And in order to protect everybody, I need to recognize that I am part of the problem and therefore I'm part of the solution. And this is what we call system thinking, recognizing that everything is quite complex and everything is connected in a very deep web of relationships, right? And I'm part of these relationships, and therefore I'm part of the solution. So, if we think a little deeper about the challenges of the 21st century, of course, we are deep into Corona right now, but Corona has some causes, right? Corona is a consequence of what has been happening during the last, I don't know, maybe 200 years in terms of, living a new world where human society has grown exponentially. And maybe Corona is just, one small phase of what can be even worse in the next years if we do not recognize that the challenges that we have right now in the 21st century are all global challenges, and of course are system thinking challenges, right? So this first graph here is quite interesting because it shows us how the human beings, right, on planet Earth has been evolved in terms of number of people, right, in human society since the beginning of, let's say, modern human beings to the present years. And what we can see is that during a lot of time, of ourselves, human being on Earth, we have been less than maybe a few 100 million people, right? And we went through an exponential growth since the beginning of the 20th century, which took us from more or less 1 billion human being at the beginning of the 20th century to right now maybe 7 to 8 billion human beings. And of course, it's an exponential challenge, right? Which puts us in front of exponential problems, but also exponential opportunities for us to design the future that we really desire. So let's have a look first at the exponential challenge of living with 8 or maybe 9, in the future 10 billion human beings. The first question is that we need to be able to provide quality of life and right, get older together, but get older having longevity with quality of life for all of us and not only part of the population. Just to give you an idea, to take the example of Brazil, the provision is that in Brazil in 2040, more than 50% of the population will be more than 45 years old. So we need to think about the new world that we will have, right? The new world we need to design, taking into account the new shape of the population we will live with. Then the second point, of course, it's quite obvious, but it needs to be remembered, is that it's one thing to be able to feed 1 billion human beings. It's another thing to be able to feed maybe 8, 9, or 10 billion human beings with sustainability. What we know right now is that close to 1 billion human beings do not have enough food to have a healthy life. And what we know is that in order to be able to feed properly 10 billion human beings in 2050, we will need to raise up the productivity of agribusiness by 70%. It's a lot, it's complex, and we have to do that with sustainability, which is even more complex, right? And this is only a big challenge that comes from, the exponential growth of human being and the fact that we need to live as a whole united society, human society. And of course, this one is quite obvious. We need to provide access to health to all of us. So very soon, we hope we'll have a vaccine against COVID-19, right? Against the coronavirus. Now, the question is, how is this vaccine being distributed? How is it going to be produced? How much is it going to cost? And will it be accessible for all human beings all across the world, right? It's not a very simple challenge to be able to provide good health, quality, accessibility to health to all of us all across the world. Then we have the question of energy. Everything in the reality actually is energy. And as a human society, we need to be able to provide enough sustainable energy for all of us. And once again, it's a big challenge. How do we provide, for a billion human beings, enough energy in the energy transition without deepening the problem we have started with not being sustainable in terms of energy production and energy distribution? Then you can call it education, or you can call it culture, you can call it knowledge, whatever we call it. We need to be able to provide access to culture or to education or to knowledge fairly with quality everywhere in the world. Like right now, you guys are listening to me through the internet because you have access to the internet, you have a device, so we can exchange, and that's nice. But the real question we need to ask is, what about the people who are not able to join right now this virtual campus party in UK, right, or wherever in the world? How do we provide access to culture, access to idea, access to knowledge to all people who are not equally inserted into the digital world? Then we could talk about jobs. I don't know if we have to call that jobs, or if we have to call it, I don't know, activities, or you fulfilling your destiny, or whatever you want to call it. But the fact is that we are going through an accelerated digital transformation because of Corona once again. And this put us in front of another challenge. How do we provide equality of chances and equity of chances for all of us, in terms of all of us being able to fulfill their destiny, being able to bring what they have to bring to human society, and not being taken away because of the digital transformation? We can actually deepen, the separation or the fragmentation that we have between whoever has access and who has not access to digital tools. Because this is what really matters in the end, right? What really matters is to be able to create and distribute wealth fairly. This is what we're here for. If we are not here, in my very humble opinion, at our campus party, or whatever I do myself here at the Innovation Center I'm going to present afterwards, if we're not here to be able to create and distribute wealth fairly, then we're just losing our time. And it's always good to remember that in a very close future, in 2050, 2/3 of the human population will live in Africa, Asia, and India and Southeast Asia, right? So it's more or less 3 billion people in Africa and 3 billion people between between India and Southeast Asia. And if we make the sum of all the economic wealth that is produced by this country that I've mentioned before, we come to the number of 7% of the worldwide wealth which is produced, economic wealth which is produced, right? So the question we need to ask ourselves is there any really sustainable future if 2/3 of the human society lives with 7%, or let's say 8%, or maybe 10% of the economic wealth which is generated in the world? Of course, this is not sustainable. So the real question is how, innovation, technology, entrepreneurship is able to create and distribute wealth, of course, health by itself, energy, all the topics we've mentioned before. And as it is not complex enough, there is one more dimension we need to remember. All of this that has been said before, producing energy enough for all of us, having access to health, being able to live better and longer, has to be done with sustainability in the energy transition. The energy model that we have created in the 18th, 19th century are not fit to what we live right now in terms of reality, of course, because they are based on providing non-renewable energy. So what we need to do right now is to promote this energy transition, which will be able to allow us to go through all the challenges we've mentioned before in the energy transition. In order to illustrate that, so I have another bench of graphs here. So on your left, what you can see right now is how the global temperature has changed since 1850 to the present day, right? 2018. And you can see as we got closer to the 21st century, things are going very clear. I mean, in the sense that the raise up of the temperature is exponential, and the tendency is very clear of, unfortunately, going through a global warming situation. And now what you can see here on your right is, of course, what has happened very recently in the Corona crisis. So as we need to stay home, right, and a good amount of our economic activities have been stuck, have stopped during the last month. Of course, this has been a consequence also on greenhouse effect gas emission, right? So this is what all of you have seen at the beginning of this year 2020. We are going back more or less to what we have in terms of greenhouse gas effect in maybe 2010, right? Now, the real question is what is going to happen after the Corona crisis? What is going to happen after the Corona crisis? We will just kick and be back to even a more exponential growth of global warming, or shall we maybe go on with a more sustainable way of recreating a new world, designing the new world that we really desire? These are two very different scenarios, because if we go back on growing, of course, exponentially in terms of global warming, things are going to be even worse. I mean, COVID-19 will just be a glimpse of the worst thing that can be afterwards. So this is how we need to think our future. This is how we need to think what we need to provide in terms of innovation, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of solution. This is the new world that we have right now because of this Corona crisis, the opportunity of designing. This is really the right moment right now in 2020, right? So what's the purpose for the 21st century? That's the question we need to ask, because we want to design innovation ecosystem. We want to provide technology. We want to provide entrepreneurship, but for what purpose? If we do not find the right purpose, then all of that will be completely useless. So the purpose I would like to propose, maybe for whatever we want to be in terms of entrepreneur technology we want to develop, is always to remember that everything we do, all the technology that we develop and everything that we do as entrepreneur, has to be focused on progress and developing well-being for as much people as we can, and providing happiness for all of us. Maybe we have to switch a little bit of the indicators, right? The key performance indicators we use on a day-to-day basis. Maybe switching from how much revenue we make or this kind of indicators to how much happiness we provide, or how much being we are able to provide. This said, of course, we need disruptive innovation, because the models that took us to the beginning of the 21st century will not take us to what come in the next years, right? If we want to provide a sustainable growth, we need disruptive innovation and not incremental innovation. And this is, of course, a good bench of ideas on where to find good innovation, good entrepreneurial activities. So if I don't have any idea, I don't know where to start, I want to be an innovator, I want to develop technology, but I don't know where to start, maybe let's start with that, right? These are the famous sustainable goals for the 21st century: no poverty, no hunger, quality for education, gender equity and equality. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is a maybe good source of inspiration for innovation and for entrepreneurship. Now I'm going to show you a few examples of what a given innovation ecosystem can do. So I'm going to show you the ecosystem where I'm calling you right now, I'm connecting you right now, and maybe show some examples of what we do. So, as I've mentioned before, I live right here in the city of Curitiba, which is in the south of the city of São Paulo in Brazil. And this is a Google map, right, of the innovation ecosystem I live in. What is this innovation ecosystem? So it's all written in Portuguese, so of course not so easy for you guys to understand what's written right here. But what I want to explain to you is that very close to where I work, the innovation center, the research center where I work, we are close to all the universities of the region. We are close to the big companies, such as, I don't know, the German Bosch, or the Brazilian Mondelez, or the French Renault, or the Brazilian Boticário. And we have also, all the main entrepreneur activities, such as Vale do Pinhão, which belongs to the city of Curitiba. So the idea behind showing this map is just remembering that, it's an ecosystem in the full sense of what an ecosystem is. We are, living companies, we are living institutions that need to cooperate, to live together, to develop symbiosis in order to provide the future we really desire, right? So the idea of being inside of this innovation ecosystem is to provide the right partnerships and relationship with all these actors, the universities, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the companies, so that together we can design the future, and forgetting about the walls and forgetting about the fences that just, takes us one apart from the other. So two very quick examples of what emerges inside of this innovation ecosystem. The first one I want to show you is an applied research and development project we are developing with a startup company called High Technology. So this startup called High Technology has developed a system called HiLab. And what is HiLab? It is basically an IoT, Internet of Things, equipment that allows you, with artificial intelligence connected to the cloud, to diagnose quickly in like 10 to 15 minutes, and then having access to the result of your diagnosis online, many kind of disease. And of course, right now, what we are doing together with High Technology, and here you can see Marcus, who is the CEO and founder of High Technology, we are accelerating their capabilities of producing COVID-19, right, corona diagnosis, serologic corona diagnosis, so that we can have plenty of diagnosis. The more diagnosis we have, accessible diagnosis to the population, the better, in order to have data and understand what's happening, and therefore fight for the health and for the capability of fighting against corona. So I'm not going to enter in all details right here, but just remember that inside of this innovation ecosystem, good partnerships can emerge in order to accelerate, to amplify, let's say, the capability of action of a given startup, which has a good technology solution for providing a more sustainable future. The other one I want to show is this other partnership we have with another startup, which comes from a little south of Brazil, another state of the country called Santa Catarina. And the startup is called TNS. And this is right here, Gabriel, the founder of TNS. And what we're doing with them is to develop antiviral coating using silver nanoparticles. And the idea of doing that is being able to create a coating that we will use on spray to turn, the surfaces resistant to corona, right? So the idea of using these nanoparticles inside of coating is that the disease cannot be transmitted anymore through, I don't know, tables, chairs, whatever you can touch with your hands, and maybe has the virus and therefore can transmit the virus to you. So once again, it's a partnership inside of the innovation ecosystem where we can develop together the technologies that make sense, right? And right now, what really makes sense is to be able to fight corona so that we can also, avoid the economic crisis we are going through, unfortunately, because of corona, and making things have more sense on what we really want to achieve with the innovation and technology. So I'm going to skip all of that and just say a few words right now, because we are going close to the end, about leadership, because this is a point that really makes a lot of sense. Because if we want this innovation ecosystem to provide a sustainable future that interests us, we need to cross the threshold. We need to take the initiative. We need leadership. So first, let's remember that innovation is progress, as it has been said before. Let's remember that the challenges that we have in the 21st century are exponential, systemic challenges, as we can see right here in this graph, right? So the corona challenge, for example, is at the same time an health and an economic and a human challenge. And all the dimensions, of this challenge live together. I cannot just look at the economic problem without looking at the health problem. But of course, the health problem is a cause and a consequence at the same time of the economic problem. So we need, systemic understanding of this challenge in order to address it. And this is what is system thinking. So without entering in too much detail, system thinking is the ability to recognize the relationship, the cause-effect relationship between, this complexity of variables that we have in the 21st century. And in order, therefore, to solve this complex problem, what is really needed is to have an understanding of the systemic structures that created and replicates the problems. And in order to do so I'm not going to enter into too much detail right now, but there is a very interesting theory of leadership which has been developed in the MIT Sloan School of Management by Peter Senge and Otto Scharmer, which is called Theory U. And Theory U is basically the ability of myself to recognize my own blind spots. If I'm not able, as a leader, to transform the reality I live in, it's because maybe there is a part of me that is not prepared to see the complexity of the world the way it is. So the real question of being a transformative leader in the 21st century in order to provide a more sustainable world, the real question is which part of me must cease to be in order to let my consciousness of the all emerge? That's the big question. How do I have to transform my own mental model if I want myself to be able to understand the world I live in and therefore provide really useful, innovative solution? So in order to conclude right now, my desire for this very quick intervention here at the UK Campus Party is for us together to be able to build a future that we really desire. And as everything is always changing, right? We're talking a lot about digital transformation and mutation, everything. One question I would like to ask is, if everything is always changing and if everything is in perpetual mutation, what do we want to keep? What do we want not to change? Because plenty of things are changing and will change. But the real big question is, what do we want to conserve? What do we want not to change, right? Because if we're able to answer this question, what do I want not to change? What do I want to conserve? Maybe this is where I can be an entrepreneur. And maybe this is where I can innovate. If I want to conserve ethics, if I want to conserve morality, if I want to conserve life, right? Maybe this is where I have to be an innovative person in order to provide really and design the future that we together really desire. All right, so that's it for me today. Thank you so much for the opportunity of having me. And I will be glad to be helpful if I can be helpful. So, you have all my data at the campus party. So if someone has any comment or want to share something, it will be really my great pleasure and my great honor. Congratulations to the organization of the campus party. Congratulations to you right now, who is an entrepreneur, is an innovator, and want to shape the future. And please count on me for what I can be helpful. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening, day, wherever you are.